issues here in this beautiful land of ours. I want to welcome you to the program, Brother Tacuma.
It's always a good sense to be here so that we could directly address our views. A lot of important things are happening in the society.
Indeed. I think the major issue is the recent meeting between Maduro and Ali in St. Vincent. Briefly summarize your thoughts on the...
Well, I think my thoughts are reflected in the WPA statement, which hopefully you will read.
Yes, sir.
And I want to draw it to people's attention that the statement is reproduced, representing fairly well established views on the Mararo waves. It may also be on other news outlets, but I know I saw it on those news things. My view is basically, in a nutshell, because we will develop it as we discuss, is that I'm not convinced that the president was well advised to participate in the meeting in the first place. And I'm not convinced that Guyana came out of the meeting with anything tangible. And I guess as you read the statement and we continue the discourse, we could elaborate more on those things. I know some people on the government side is hailing it as a great grand success.
Fools.
But I don't.
Anyway, let's read the statement that the WPA has put out. Bear with us as we go through what the WPA has said. The statement was issued on December 15, 2023. And it says the WPA remains uncomfortable with the recent summit held in St. Vincent between the President of Guyana and Venezuela. To begin with, WPA was skeptical of the objectives of the meeting. While we believe that bilateral dialogue between Guyana and Venezuela should not be taken off the table, we do not think it should have been a first resort. We were and are cognizant of Venezuela's desire for such a meeting and feel that they should not have been unconditionally rewarded. We are also aware that Venezuela wanted a substitute for the ICJ process, which it unequivocally rejects. A minimum condition for such a meeting, therefore, should have been Venezuela's withdrawal of the decrees enacted in the wake of the referendum and a cessation of all hostilities towards Guyana. Failure to get Venezuela to agree to those conditions meant that President Ali walked into the proverbial political trap. His declaration that he would not discuss the border controversy was naive on his part. WPA also has great difficulty with Dr. Ralph Gonzalez and his CARICOM colleagues spearheading the meeting. The utterances of some CARICOM leaders on the developments over the last few weeks left no doubt about where they stood. There is no guarantee that these leaders were prepared to take a principled stand in support of Guyana's just case. Their position is driven by their gratitude to Venezuela for its economic aid to their countries. WPA is disgusted by this hustler mentality, which has poisoned the region's elite political culture. It is against this background that WPA is unsurprised by, but disappointed with the Argyle Declaration. We are of the firm view that the Argyle Declaration in its totality represents an advantage for Venezuela at the expense of Guyana's interest. In this regard, WPA strongly feels that CARICOM's leadership has sacrificed Guyana's territorial interests for its own narrow political and economic interests. This flies in the face of the traditional spirit of Caribbean integration. First, it cannot be accidental that the declaration describes the matter as a dispute between Guyana and Venezuela, and thus calls on the two countries to de-escalate hostilities. This is a slap in the face of Guyana from the standpoint of international law. Essequibo is not disputed territory. Further, Guyana has never, in the word or deed, threatened Venezuela on the matter. Rather, it is Venezuela which has, since 1966, been hostile to Guyana. Second, the insertion of the Geneva Agreement as a central clause in the declaration while omitting the ICJ process represents a coup in favor of Venezuela. Although the Geneva Agreement provides a forum for dialogue, it was never intended to determine the validity of the 1899 arbitration award. This historic position by Guyana has not been endorsed by the Argyle Declaration, a failure that in effect amounts to an endorsement of Venezuela's official position. Third, while WPA accepts that Venezuela's agreement to cease hostilities towards Guyana could provide some space and time for the latter to rally more support for its cause, the price it has paid is too high. It is clear that Maduro has something to take back to his supporters, while the Guyana government came out of the meeting without any tangible gains. This lopsided outcome hurts Guyana's morale and could be detrimental to its case in the medium to long term. WPA hastens to point out that Venezuela's threat to Guyana is not just military in nature, it is also economic. Venezuela is threatening to stifle Guyana economically. The decision to pass a budget for Essequibo and to arrogate unto itself the right to authorize investments in the territory should not be underestimated. Further, WPA takes this opportunity to reiterate its view that the Guyana government must hastily move to lead the crafting of a national initiative to combat Venezuela's aggression. This must include, at a minimum, an all-party forum which should take full advantage of all the technical and professional expertise at our disposal. The WPA does not rule out other more robust forms of national governance. Fifth, WPA supports a weaponizing of the Army to meet the current military challenges. This must be part of an overall strategy that clearly defines the role of the armed forces in non-partisan terms. While WPA is aware of the political and ethnic sensitivities of this issue, it feels that the urgency of the matter requires some degree of flexibility by the political forces. Further, it is our view that the government must make every effort to ensure that all groups in the society are encouraged to join the army. Defense of the country should transcend the ethno-social divide. Finally, WPA supports the crafting of a genuine development plan that takes into consideration the Venezuelan threat. It is our view that the economic development cannot be divorced from the defense of our territorial integrity. The alleviation of poverty, for example, must be pursued in a more structural manner and with much more purpose. That's the 5-point statement that was issued by the Working People's Alliance that is found in the Starbuck News and Demerara Waves. So, Brother Ogun, based upon your knowledge of this statement and the points that are raised, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I think it was a well thought out statement on the behalf of the WPA executive, because this is not a normal political matter. Mm-hmm. This is a major political matter that involves the territorial integrity of the country and is likely to have long-lasting effects on what happened in terms of that particular issue. Therefore, for us as a party, we felt that we need to discuss the matter very objectively and dispassionately. We know that there is a tendency in the society that automatically feels that some discussion is better than no discussion, and that the fact that the two leaders met, okay, for some of them it is, some degree of comfort. We took the opposite position because in these matters, people sign all kinds of things, and 2 weeks, 2 months after, they behave like if they never had agreement. And because Guyana and Venezuela is not on par, both militarily and in population size, the engagement is not balanced. Therefore, Guyana is at a disadvantage. It's not like if two countries that are fairly evenly balanced militarily and in terms of numbers enter into this agreement, and the other side decide to back out and to become engage in hostility, you are capable of responding, in kind to balance it off. That is not the situation Guyana finds itself in. Our major defense has to be a diplomatic defense, and we have spent quite a lot of time in this current crisis. We have done it over the years, right? But then to restrict the observation to this current crisis, as a country and government, we have done a lot of work to try to sensitize the world to this aggression by Venezuela. And I think anybody objectively who have been reflecting on this situation before the Maduro-Ali meeting, the majority of persons agree that Venezuela has been isolated on the matter, and the majority of the world opinion was with Guyana. Now, my concern and the WPA concern, in part, is that the very fact that we had the meeting plays to the Venezuelans' game plan. Because what we do, whether we may not have intentionally, did it, but as a consequence of agreeing to the meeting, what we do is take out some of the tension out of the equation from Venezuela, okay, and give Maduro and Venezuela a chance to represent itself to the world that is not engaged in any major hostility against Guyana, while they have all the capacity to engage in hostility anytime they choose. So what we have done, in a way, is to begin to dismantle our international coalition. That may be a little strong a word, but what I'm trying to do is that, in international relations, you have to fight for space and attention because so many things happen in the world so fast. And so far, we have got significant attention. If the meeting project the view that there's a rapport between Venezuela and Guyana, and that tensions are easing and retreating, then the issue is not of that significant for the rest of the world. And in so doing, Guyana, if we are faced with a new assault by Venezuela a month or two from now, we have to really kind of rebuild or restart our diplomacy to get people to be really interested. And I think that we should not have taken that pressure off of Venezuela, because that's a major trump card we had, is to keep Venezuela looking bad in the eyes of the world as an aggressor, trying to take advantage of a small country in terms of population and militarily, but we give them a way to represent themselves as respectable, partners in the global and the regional situation.
I before the actual publishing of the detailed agreement, I got in my WhatsApp from the group that I'm in a brief of what the agreement was, and as soon as I saw it, I said, "This is madness." I didn't even bother to read the entire thing because from the beginning, you see that Guyana had put itself in a place that was undesirable. All right, and later on they said they would publish the entire thing. But the government's sense of what it should do is really out of place and out of time. If they had listened and had, because even the day before, I think my father-in-law did say to me that Gordon Mosley had a call-in program, and the sentiments that were being expressed overwhelming was that Ali had no place, going to the meeting. And because of these sentiments that were being expressed, it pushed them to put out a statement, the government, saying that they are not, and they subsequently wrote Gonzales on it, saying that they were not going to discuss the ICJ matter, that matter should not be on the card, because that is Guyana's position and that is where they want the matter to be settled. But then when you read what they discussed and what came out of it, as the WPS said here, they have basically isolated the ICJ issue, and they have gone back to this Geneva Agreement, which essentially places them 10 steps backwards than 1 step forward. So the idea of trust in the CARICOM partners, well, we don't know they're partners because in the first instance when the matter started, we saw Maya Motley, dancing around the issue, and then subsequently 1 week afterwards she had an agreement signed with Venezuela for aid and so on. So Venezuela has been integral to the development that has taken place in St. Vincent, all right, and through the Petro-Caribbean deal. I don't want to, when I was there some years ago, they were building that new airport. And I think, if I remember correctly, we had elections that same year. And that was a major point for Gonzales in his campaign, that they're going to build this new airport. And I think that airport, if I'm not wrong, was also heavily financed by contributions from Venezuela. All right? So they have been benefiting, and so they don't want to condemn Venezuela. And instead of standing with Guyana, they are now trying to, in my sense, railroad Guyana into a position of weakness and, giving Maduro an advantage over us in this situation. Why should they act like that?
It's opportunism, it's political opportunism. You see, I don't know. I guess the Caribbean leaders are dividing on it. I don't think Trinidad, Trinidad seems to be taking a more responsible position, but Mortley and Gonzales, they are very questionable characters. They are basically political hustlers. And I think that their position on this matter is basically driven by their own personal and the national concerns, and they're prepared to sell Guyana down the line, and to put us in a position, as you correctly said, in a disadvantageous position. I notice the Trinidad foreign minister in an interview, I think, with Garden, one of Trinidad newspapers, did say that the meeting started with a lot of tension and throwing of remarks between the two leaders. It didn't start nice. I can't remember the exact words that he used. And there was the intervention of CARICOM leaders to see without things and so forth and so forth. But what I find very strange is that if this was a great achievement that both sides have been comfortable with, why is it when the statement was read, the two leaders were absent and Gonzales read the statement to the press in the absence of the two leaders? Now, in political terms, that is very very questionable, because If I'm a sponsor of such an important event, and I satisfy we made significant progress and everybody agrees we make progress, then you highlight the progress by the major
presence, as a sign of endorsement.
as endorsement. But this didn't happen, which forced me to want to know what really played out and whether the accord was just a last minute attempt to save the face of the organizers, and the meeting. I don't know. But I find that very strange. And I think the president should offer an explanation to the nation. Why is it the two leaders did not, at least even if they allow Gonzalez to read the statement, at least their physical presence ought to be there. And that definitely is troubling, very troubling.
Yeah, but the WPA raises a concern about reference to the matter as a dispute.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that question?
Well, we have always took the position that it is a controversy, not a dispute. There is no dispute over the territory. Venezuela have been pressing the question of dispute. Over the years, we have been pressing controversy. And to have them insert the word dispute into the statement is a big concession to Venezuela at the expense of Guyana. And the president ought to explain why he didn't, fight back against that, and if he actually fought back against it, he should tell the nation. Because that is a very significant part, of how you perceive the dispute, the controversy. Venezuela wanted to be perceived as a dispute, which gave both sides some rights to pursue. But if the controversy take away that from them, and I'm also concerned that this meeting before the ICJ ruling, I can't see how it helps Guyana. In these matters, you never know all the undercurrents that is being played out. And as much as the ICJ, it's international court, is subject to political manipulation and all kinds of things. So you can never be too certain. And I think it is in the Guyana's best interest to have a very clear ruling from the ICJ in our favor. And from then, we could begin to talk with anybody. But without the ICJ judge's ruling, and you begin to talk with Venezuela, we don't know. People could be selling them the idea that, Guyana and Venezuela have come around to this, to understanding on this, and don't come down hard on Venezuela, because, it could provoke a situation and find some way to give Venezuela something out of it. That is when you open, to my mind, is when you open yourself to. Whereas we didn't want that. We want a clear ICJ ruling before any talk to Venezuela, so we know where we stand internationally. But because I'm telling you, in politics you got to be realistic. There's all kinds of undercurrents that you don't necessarily control. When you open the door in a certain way, you have no control. And the thing is, Venezuela has all its options. It haven't denounced its claim to our territory. It haven't denounced, put aside its referendum. They haven't put aside its various degrees. It moved to its parliament to have budgetary allocation, to administrative approach. It has its military well prepared that it could use at any time. So Venezuela is not, when you watch at Venezuela right now, it has all its options at its disposal. None of its options have been compromised. Because, let us say for the sake of argument, Venezuela wasn't keen on a military invasion now. And it was using the military invasion as an instrument of fear. CARICOM forced Guyana to respond in the way we respond. Venezuela achieve what it set out to achieve without losing anything. I never intend to invade it right now. So invasion was not a big thing. You know, there might be a problem down the road, but really right now. But they force us to behave like invasion chickens. You know,
Yeah,
so once you hear
chickens.
invasion, you think, you know, and you got to take whatever you get to save your skin. And in so doing, you know, you surrender your trump card. Your trump card is the ICJ to keep Venezuela in the awkward diplomatic position that they find themselves in the world, isolated and is being seen as a bully. All the major countries have been condemning them. Now, an important part of Maduro and Venezuela diplomacy is to soften that, to represent themselves as non-aggressor, and to represent themselves as being reasonable, while they have all the trump cards to be executed whenever they want. You know.
So why didn't Jagdio, the man who knows all, why didn't he go to the meeting? A meeting of that nature. Why did he just send Nandilal and the other stupid one?
Well, you know, Jagdio is the boss. And Jagdio will say, I don't want to give my hand too nasty in this matter.
He want to get Guyana, I see.
I understand.
But he knows very well that Maduro has been condemning him for his actions here in Guyana, calling him a dictator and accusing him of taking the resources of Guyana and using it for his friends and his family and all of these things. So my own thinking is that he was afraid of confronting Maduro to be embarrassed. Because the same thing that he's accusing Maduro, he's guilty of the same, and Maduro knows that and has been putting it to the public. You understand? So we got the same two faces on the same coin. You understand? So he ain't want to go to the meeting. So he sent the jokers, and they have come back proclaiming that they have achieved. When in fact, I mean, if you look at what they have done, they have put us in a terrible place.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but I heard on Dr. Hines' program, Waldron, our legal parliamentarian, and she was talking about the period when we had in the Foreign Service excellent diplomats and so on who could have represented us at a forum like that and would have brought us out in a way, even if we did attend, that we could have actually said that we have achieved. But what about those people who are actually saying that we got something out of it? Our position seemed to be totally different. What have we gotten out of that? You have explained basically. I mean, you did say a lot. But in essence, we have come out on the losing end.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely sad, you know.
Even I read that a few of the people who sing Guyana came out good, and it's an excellent outcome for Guyana. And basically what they're saying is the fact that Venezuela said, because the statement said that none of the two countries will use violence and the threat of violence. I mean, Guyana got no violence to use against Venezuela. So the fact that Venezuela said, I think we use violence against Guyana. I mean, oh, come on. I mean, this is politics. People say all kinds of things, and the next day, it's like it doesn't matter. You know? So I don't know what Guyana gained. I don't see this great achievement for Guyana. It doesn't stop Maduro from tomorrow, if he judges in the best interest, to send some troops into Guyana territory in a piecemeal way, not a necessary open. I think Maduro would not, there's no judgment, subjective judgment. It could be, I looking at the matter, I think Maduro will recognize the consequences of a full-out invasion of Guyana will bring down the wrath of the world upon Venezuela. But I think Maduro is prepared to play the piecemeal game that he, if it's in his internal interest, like he facing the elections, to send the troops and occupy a part of Guyana, okay, he could live without condemnation because he knows that that condemnation will not lead to a full-scale response militarily from the rest of the world. You know, because he occupies a small place. But he gets what he wants, telling people, they see, you know, we're advancing, we're line in march. No, Guyana, you know, left in the problem. So I don't know we could say we get anything out of it. Maduro word doesn't mean nothing. He's not a person you could trust. And remember, Maduro is facing a life and death internal struggle. And at the end of the day, he will put his interest and his party interest above anything he's saying with Guyana and CARICOM. So I don't know what they're seeing.
So what about this call for a national approach to dealing? I mean, it's not new. From the beginning of the controversy, there has been this call for rallying. There was some lukewarm attempts, events here, the opposition leader meeting the president and so on. But you don't get a sense that there is really any concerted effort at bringing the nation together in a way that would make us feel that we are moving together as one people in this struggle. I mean, you listen to the man in the street in the African community. Why must we fight Venezuela for a country that we never not know good? The other thing they're saying that if the people take Venezuela is who get all the riches there. Black people ain't get nothing over there and so on. We got a few villages, but everything else they're given to the Indians. I mean, this is the kind of thinking. I mean, it's not laudable, but it tells where we are politically, and it tells, you know, how people feel about the dealings of the government in relation to race.
Yeah.
So that racial degeneration in terms of people coming together as a nation should be put squarely at the feet of Jagdeo and the PPP. And all this, you know, I mean, they're just basically feeling that, you know, they can gloss this over. And just as they've been dealing with the local situation, that they are dealing with an international situation in the very same way.
Yes, look, the PPP, as we said on previous programs, they're not patriotic to the extent that they ought to be. And they're political hustlers. You see, when you're a political hustler, what is important is your self-interest, your narrow partisan interest, and so forth. And they don't really have, you know, genuinely the national interest, because if you have the national interest, you would not miss the historic moment that this crisis posed for unite the country, and you would take bold steps to unite the country. You can't wait till the tanks run over the border and then try to unite the country. There's a time when people may be running away. You know, rather than going forward, people may be going backwards. You have to unite the country long before that. And as we said here on Walter Rodney Groundings, we said, look, when they met, when the government and the opposition met, when Norton met with Ali, we on this program said it was a welcome first step, that, you know, they have demonstrated some political maturity, and that we're seeing, you know, a willingness, you know, in light of the border challenge, to have a political rapport. The first step. But we made the point that, look, for us on the Walter Rodney Groundings, we were looking for something more tangible in terms of the African community, and we said, look, at least the government should have reconciled with the public sector workers, and to call the union's leadership in, and to engage in collective bargaining with the unions in the context of the border crisis, and to demonstrate a willingness, okay, to change your ways. Because at the end of the day, what they have been doing to the public service since 1992 when they came to power is pauperizing the public service by depriving them the right to collective bargaining. And in so doing, they have been pauperizing the African community. Now, you can't be pauperizing the African community and then you're going to want to call upon the same African community in the context of a major life and death conflict, potential life and death conflict, for them to, to willingly, pick up guns and to go to the border. And that the least the government ought to have done, in my view, to show it is serious about national unity in the context of the border, was to say to the public sector workers and the leaders that, look, in the context of this crisis, we need to reconcile and we need to unite the country because you are an important sector, okay, in the society. They didn't do that. And money is not a problem. That's the point. If in a situation where money is a problem, you could say, okay, politicians may not want to go in certain directions because they can't pay the bill. This is a situation where they could pay the bill. So it's political bad-mindedness.
No, I don't understand you saying money is not a problem. Because they gave the public sector workers 6%. And in trying to justify that, Jack Gill is saying that the people who are condemning it have no sense of macroeconomics and how a country is run. He is saying that you don't just look at the wages and the salaries that people are getting, you have to balance it with what is happening in other sectors of the economy, and they have no idea what we're talking about. So, I mean, he knows what he's talking about. They have been giving 6% when we did not have oil and we did not have any other income that would have from the green sector and all these areas. And they were giving 5 and 6%. Now, in a situation where you have them withdrawing 20 billion every 3 months from the Natural Resource Fund, he's saying that the economy is unbalanced. I mean, this economic czar is speaking to people in a way that tries to suggest that we are illiterate about what we have and what can justifiably be given to people. So you saying that we have is not Jack Dio's view.
Yeah, but Jack Dio can whatever he want. These resources are not Jack Dio resources. These are not personal resources. These are national resources that belong to the people of the country. And Jack Dio's argument doesn't even worth even discussing. Because the man is just being a shameless, ruthless dictator. The first point is, those who labor you depend upon, and in this situation, is the public sector workers, okay, as workers, and the state as the employer. And internationally, constitutionally, legally, the workers has a right to determine and participate in determining the value of the labor power. That is where we start in a civilized society and civilized governments. It's not the government or the employer by his or herself, okay, decide that, look, the value of workers' wage is X. It's not slavery. So workers have a right to participate, and this is written in the Constitution. It is written in all the international conventions that the governments sign, and it's established precedents that the workers are not begging a favor. They are engaging in a legal transaction to determine a fair deal for the labor power. So it's not Jack Dio or any government to tell the workers that you got to accept 6%. That's dictatorial behavior, and that's exactly what he's doing. You understand? And all the macroeconomic arguments, he is the only economic expert in the world. He's some economic god. So he laid out, on people, and the country must accept what he said. There's nonsense, but my concern is, and we have been seeing it over and over, is the response to labor. I haven't seen an active response in rejection of this 6.5% by the labor leaders. Um, Somewhere somebody said they had a press conference and they spoke on the matter. But I talk about that you don't get a sense that there's a robust engagement on the matter. And I think that that is a mistake. I think that the union's supposed to be kicking up hell on this thing, at least in the newspapers and the public space. You know, you're telling me, Art, you know, your members are not probably the best position to strike and to come on the road, and it may be Christmas and all, but what's stopping you from a robust public engagement? In the 70s and the 80s, I'm telling you, faced with less situation like that, the leadership of the trade unions and the, you know, used to get the place hot in terms of at least discourse. And I think it is the muted, almost muted response by organized labor that emboldened Jagdeo that he could stand and insult the intelligence of the country. You know?
But you know, going back to the period after 1992 when the PPP came to power, and they were calling for 30-something% increase or something like that. And President Jagan told them that if they could find the money, then he was going to pay.
Yeah.
They found the money.
The Armstrong Accord was the most significant increase.
So,
but now we got sort of money, so this is making things more ridiculous. You don't have to sort your money right now. What Jagdo telling you? I determine the priority this money. I decide infrastructure and spending how I want spending more important than social things and remuneration for workers. This money is me own, and you all got to, you know, dance me tune. But you only could do that because the population and the workers are allowing him to do it.
But my point is, when Sherry told them to find it, the union was of such, it was so diligent, you know, with people of the caliber that could have sat down and combed through, you know, the economic account of the country and point to exactly how much was where and so on and so on. Why can't the union, we haven't heard them, Jagdeo is making these foolish statements, nonsensical, absolutely ridiculous, and nobody has come up with the figures to show him.
But there's no need for figures, man. The overwhelming amount of money that we have. What's the money we got in the national fund that we're using? You know, man, let me tell you something. I will not dignify Jagdeo behavior and the response to Jagdeo as a question of figures. Money is not the problem. You know, we're sitting in the fund of umpteen millions of dollars, not being to US dollars being touching. So that is not the issue. They come over and Jagdeo knows the truth. Jagdeo play Jago game. He say, you know, you go to the books because he know the books will blow them apart. But I mean, everybody in all the unions, man, they must know how much money coming every month. You know, but it boils down to the will. And at present, the Jagdeo, the PPP, the government, okay, is winning the battle because they're able to impose the will upon the rest of the public sector workers in the country as a whole, and the workers in the country as a whole hasn't find the strength to fight back. The day you see they find the strength to fight back, you're going to see how quick they're going to pay up. Because they could pay up, and I think that is what Jagdeo, this is what got to understand the criminal nature of Jagdeo. Jagdeo, no, he ain't under no pressure. He got the money. If they put pressure on me, I can pay them. So he's confident that, look, I really know real difficult situation here. So as long as they want to play the game they're playing and they ain't fighting back in a certain way, we could drag this thing out to our advantage. The day they fight back, we could pay them and solve the problem. That's basically going on here.
Yeah, but it's absolutely sad. I mean, my basic concern is, you know, the fact that people's ability to live, you know, has been so eroded in the past 5 years, that 6.5% cannot in any way
Far below inflation, man.
match the erosion of the household economy. Jagdeo claims to be so brilliant, and he talks a lot of nonsense. People who know economics will know he talks a lot of, the right word for it, I can't even say it on this station, right? But at least the decent thing to do would have been trying to at least bring people back to a level, even if you don't want them to make it appear that they're above, the minimum threshold for a basket of goods for a month. That you could have brought them up to a level where they possibly were preceding this slide in terms of their ability to live. But when you give them 6.5%, I mean, you are basically allowing them to be further down the road from where they were in 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
They're not coming up at all. They're continuing to decline because 2 months down the road, next year starts, this trend that is taking place now with the global situation and the prices racing away and leaving people behind, it's not going to stop.
No, I mean, any government, man, any decent government, the first thing you gotta do is try to keep people's income and the value of people's dollar keeping up with inflation. So if you got 20% inflation, at least you got to keep the guaranteed 20% increase. Just to make sure that they're back, as you say, they're back to normal. They may, okay? And
our normal was never
a real normal. Because we normal is very low normal. We normal we started at a very low level.
So.
But you see, but it's not, you see, we gotta be clear, there's not a technical deficiency in Jagdeo. That was ABC economics, man. And Jagdeo knows exactly that he talking economic foolishness, but there's the political logic is what is important here. No, the Jagdeo knows, you think. I hear somebody tell me, I read it, that Jagdeo saying, explaining the 6%, island on there all the time. Therefore, we got to bear that in mind. So, for Jagdeo, he justifying the 6% to saying we got to conserve the money. Because all my done in the next 40 years, we got to get 40 years. Now, all my done in the next 40 or 50 years, So he's saying, this thing could be, you got to, but which is, I pass. But it's political I pass because he's not getting an appropriate political response. So, and that is what's important, is not a deficiency in understanding the technical side of the economics. Jagdeo don't exactly know what we're doing. But Jagdeo is acting as a ruler. These are my subjects. Okay, I get them in a certain position. Okay, by racial manipulation, political manipulation, the threat of fear, and all kinds of things. And I put them in a situation where they feel they're powerless. And my duty is to keep them there as long as possible so I could continue my march. I'm in a safe place, this is from his point of view, because if they start to kick up, I got money for pay them. Not like I ain't got no more money. So he doesn't feel that he is exposing himself on the PPP because money is there. And I think that's not Jagdeo's proceeding. It is the people and the unions, the people in the opposition that got to, skinny up.
Yeah, but this fear that you talk about, we see that being perpetrated in all spheres now. You've been subject to the intimidation of having your feet and your hands chained and so on. We had Brian Max, who alleged who made the allegation that he was attacked by 3 guys with baseball bats. And now we have Travis Chase, who again is saying that shots were fired at him, and then the police seized his gun. Um, what is really happening in terms of, you know, our dealing with a dictatorship and the increasing insertion of fear and intimidation and the threat to people's lives by this administration.
Yeah, you see, I'm worried that what we've seen is an indication that they're going back to the early period of 2002 and so, where they're working on a process or initiating a process to reintroduce, state violence, in a very major way, because all these things. Remember, you got to watch the direction. The attack on Brian Max is clearly vicious. It's clearly got a taste of state-sponsored behavior. Now, the police response to Chavez, the shooting at Chavez's car, I find it very strange and worrying, because why the police seems to be suggesting that the man shoot up his own car. That's why they're asking for a gun, okay? And they're saying, hinting that I know, and that's why I'm worried. Without any ballistics, because they didn't get the gun yet, they were saying that the bullets that hit the car is similar to what he gun is using his gun. So they're suggesting, in the public space, that this may not be a genuine attack on the car. No, that is not normal way police behave. When the police begin to behave that way, you have to become very concerned that they seems to be behaving politically. Either they feel they got something to protect for the rulers, or there's some corrupt transactions that involve the police, and they know exactly what is being played out here, and they're beginning to put up a kind of ring of defense, okay, to protect the perpetrators of the crime. And I think that this is very disturbing, very, very disturbing. And I noticed recently, a few days ago, Burke put out that in the States there, this homo was being spied upon by armed men, and he associated the men, okay, as being working with the Guyana embassy or associated to the Guyana embassy. And he calling the police, the U.S. police is investigating. So we seeing a kind of a chain of some negative events directed to opposition elements, which, it is hard for you not to begin to tie the links, to see them as isolated, unrelated incidents. I don't think I am willing to treat it that way. I think we're beginning to see emerging a pattern of the old behavior, and it's a deliberate attempt to drive fear in opponents of the government, and by extension, the population. You see, dictators are very smart, or they think they're smart until they get catch up with them. They may not be able to intimidate me and you. We will have repression, the thing, but the very act of throwing out the repression upon us, they know they're intimidating the ordinary man in the street, the ordinary supporter. So that is a very effective tool, okay, in the psychological warfare domination. And that can't, in my view, can't be countered simply by rhetoric. We can't counter that in the consciousness of the masses simply by explaining as we explaining what is going on. We have to find a way to make the masses begin to fight back. And it's in the process of fighting back, you counter the fear and the intimidation. And I think there is where the Guyanese political thinkers on the opposition has to, they have to spend a lot of energies investing, in that. As I said over and over on this program, we have done an excellent work in explaining the situation to people, and I think Guyanese generally understand the situation in the country, you know, and I'm talking mainly of opposition supporters at this point. But the big challenge is to get opposition supporters battle ready.
And to begin to speak revolution.
Yeah, that is the challenge.
The whole idea of revolution, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, all of these things are happening, and the political leadership is not giving this guidance that is saying that there must be pushback. The people themselves are, on the other hand, they understand that the leadership is doing nothing, and they seem to have resigned themselves to accepting the blows that they're getting, to the very fact that you were saying the leaders are intimidated and they are living in fear. Is this going to persist perpetually?
Well, society and history have taught us that no, at some point there's going to be a breaking point, but the issue is politics and political craft is to reduce the inevitability, to bring the inevitability forward. There is no point we extending the suffering of the masses in the country for 20 or 10 more years if we could find a way of shortening it and stop it now or in the very near future. So though change is almost inevitable, it would come at some point, political craft is to hasten the inevitability. And that is where I think Guyanese opposition leaders are lacking. They seem to have resolved that they're going to resolve this thing through elections. But the evidence that is coming out of the Elections Commission has shown that the PPP have made the Election Commission the more partisan election commission in the recent history of the country. And that GCOM is not an institution capable, when the crunch comes in the national elections, to deliver a fair and free elections. And we have seen that the JAGDIO and the PPP is maintaining, okay, the one party control the oil money, and they're going to use the oil money to corrupt people. And an important element of fair and free elections is the question of resources. You know, and in every modern society, there's even legislation out to control election spending and to restrict monies coming from all kinds of sources like drugs and all kinds of special interests, you know, to influence the outcome. And you have a situation where the government have no respect, okay, for how they use the national treasury. Now, I don't see how opposition could be so convinced themselves that in all of these situations that's unfolding on us, that we're going to have a fair and free elections, and there's going to be a possibility of defeating the PPP. I mean, I am not convinced. I'm not buying on it. I'm not sold on it.
The naivety in that, I mean, in Bath settlement during this Maduro controversy, I thought the 3-year-old Venezuelan pushing a cart and selling stuff had on the side of his cart a map showing Venezuela with Essequibo on it. Now, that's not the only interesting thing. The Venezuelan-born native doesn't have any connection to Guyanese, so we can't say that he can become some by descent that he is a Guyanese. But he has an ID card, he has a food handler certificate. Alright? The ID card would have come out of GCOM, the very GCOM that you're talking about. Right? JAGDIO has said that he's going to give them the ID cards and so on, and they are take part in elections. So this thing that you're talking about, elections as the solution to the problem, how is the opposition really sitting back? They're allowing them to register all the Venezuelans and to have them become potential voters on our list, and they're not kicking up against that. Jagdeo is bold enough to say that he's going to do it, and nobody is resisting that. All right? We don't know how many of them have already been registered, and how that will increase the capacity of the people to remain in government.
Yeah, and I'm hearing in GCOM is worse than that too. You know, normally when there's registration, you know, the registering people, which they will have to do coming up to the elections, the scrutineers, you know, visit the home of the person and have to see the person physically.
Okay.
Now the PPP in GCOM is removing that requirement. So that all you have to do is ask if the person live here, and once somebody see the person live here, that's enough. That is the validation that the person is legitimate. No, that carry backwards. No, the opposition is aware of all of this, and I don't know what they're doing. You know, I don't know what they're doing. So that is why, you know, I'm trying my best, because I know this country. I know how petty our leaders could be, and I have learned something, you know, over the time dealing with the PNC. I see, you know, if the WPA push certain things very hard, the PNC will do the opposite. If I go and say push a certain line, you know, they will do the opposite. And it really puts you in an awkward position, because on the one hand, what the situation needs is objective, you know, collective thinking, and, you know, we try to bring out the best of ideas, and we try to find some, you know, thing. But when you always have to be thinking that, look, if something I say going to offend the other side to the extent that they're going to behave in a way that consolidates the PPP, you know, you're left with a dilemma. And sadly, honestly, I feel that that's part of the problem in this place. A lack of opposition maturity where it matters. And though people give lip service to the belief in the contestation of ideas, in a real way, they don't believe in it.
Yes, Brother Ogun, you've been in this thing for pretty long. I'm beginning to think that, you know, I don't know, but we have to find a different way of dealing with our dilemma, because we are only setting ourselves up for landslide, washing us out in elections, because that's what the people will do. All right, this one seat majority and all of that. Come the next election, it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone. They have replaced all of the key stakeholders in GCOM. They're changing all of the rules and everything, and they're doing it. I mean,
there's no pushback from the opposition. You know, I don't know. If you call yourself an electoral party, and these people are doing the changing boundaries, doing all kinds of things, those are things that electoral parties bring hell down on the government, you know. So I don't know, but
it's been a pleasure having you on this program, and you folks out there, you're got to be willing to fight, because if we don't fight, we ain't getting nowhere. Alright? I got to talk with Guyanese down to work. If we ain't fight, we ain't getting nothing. Alright? And the fight got to start now. You can't wait for some leader to do things for you. You got to understand that your children have to benefit from this economy, and all the money that's going in one direction, that we got to change that so that we can begin to benefit in a serious way from all the wealth that we have. Money can't be going in one set of people's pocket all the time. And then You can't be fixing the system so that you're going to be there for the next, 40 years. That is a prediction.
Yeah.
So they are making it a reality through GCOM. Right? So some things I would say, but GCOM can change. Right? It can change because that man can't sit in a chair. Good night. Do have a blessed evening. See you next week, same time, same place, for another program of Walter Rodney.